Poll question today: who's the best player at Rogers Arena Tuesday? Jack Hughes, Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson? Vote other. You can vote at Sekeres Price on Twitter and YouTube. We will put that to our next guest, Rink White's Jeff Paterson, our Canucks reporter. But first, we got a victory over the rival Calgary Flames to discuss, including the debut of new Canucks defenseman Nikita Zadorov. Not bad.
Nikita Zadorov.
That's not, Nikita Zadorov. Hi, Jeff. How we doing?
Yeah, doing all right. And look, I think all things considered, what a weird 48 hours for him. The trade to sort of sit there in your own city, wait for your new teammates to arrive, and then play against your former team. And I thought he acquitted himself pretty well. He sounded like a guy. We had a chance to talk to him here in Vancouver on Sunday after his first practice with the Canucks at Rogers Arena, and he just seemed relieved to have that one out of the way. But, you know, more than anything, he's part of the winning side at the Saddle Dome on Saturday. And, you know, I think it's going to be a process here to figure out his role, how he's best slotted on this hockey club. Because, of course, in Calgary, part of the reason he wanted out was he was behind Rasmus Anderson, Chris Tanev, Mackenzie Weegar, Noah Hannafin. And then you come to Vancouver, well, you know that Quinn Hughes is going to play darn near half the game, and the way Philip Hronik's going, and you got Tyler Myers and Ian Cole. So, you know, is he a 5? Is he a 4? Where does he fit in? And I thought the other night in Calgary, they used him 3.5 minutes on the penalty kill. He was out there late minute or the final minute preserving the victory and ultimately contributing to the empty netter that stood up as the game winner. So I think for a guy that's still learning the systems here, you know, I think that you chalk up the first one as a rousing success, and now move on. And 5-game homestand, a pretty good opportunity for him to try to settle in to his new hometown.
Well, he talked about how being traded is nothing new to him, but of course, usually it's in the off season. We have all sorts of time to prep for the kids and schools and homes and all of that. And talking about how maybe he can be unlocked, Jeff, now that he's out of Calgary, where you rightfully point out he was behind all those defensemen. He's going to have to play a lot more penalty kill here than he did there. And I'd also like your 2 cents on the pairing, the matchup, giving him Tyler Myers and playing him on the left side.
Yeah, I mean, just on the surface, when we found out on Saturday morning at the skate that it was going to be the 2 big boys, and that is the biggest defense pairing in the National Hockey League, because nobody's taller than Tyler Myers. He's at 6'8" officially. There are a handful of 6'7s, and then Zadorov's one of a bunch of guys that are 6'6". So you can't get any larger than those 2 together. Now, when Carson Soucy got hurt, he and Myers formed, you know, a pretty sizable pair, and they were playing well as well. So I think Zadorov slots in there, and you just hope that, you know, the one thing that he brings that maybe the rest of this group doesn't is that imposing physical element. Like Tyler Myers is huge and he can throw hits, but I don't think he's out there looking to absolutely wallpaper guys, where that is part of Nikita Zadorov's DNA. And so I think Rick Tocchet talked a little bit about that he wants him to finish checks and sort of be that imposing force back there and make people think twice about sending the puck into his corner, and maybe they won't come out with the puck, and maybe they won't come out with all of their body parts. Who knows? Whatever the case, I think that in the short term here, until they prove otherwise, that is going to be a pair that the Canucks stick with, and then it means that Ian Cole will have either Noah Juulsen or Mark Friedman, because I don't think that the Canucks plan to touch that top pair of Hughes and Hronik anytime soon. So, you know, I know Zadorov talked on Saturday about the fact that you go way back in the time machine. He and Tyler Myers were a pair in Buffalo for a short while when they were both much younger. And now they've been around the block. They've made a few stops along the way. So, you know, we'll see if they can lean on some of that veteran savvy here and just be guys that can clear the front of the net, make life a little easier for Thatcher Demko, a little more difficult on opponents. And to your point about the penalty kill, Matt, that's an area of concern right now for the Vancouver Canucks. Without a doubt, it is backsliding. And, I mean, who would have thought with the change in coaching, the change in personnel, the offseason additions that were supposed to target this one particular area of the game for the Vancouver Canucks, and they're sitting at 75% on the season, 25th in the National Hockey League. They're not at the bottom, but they can see it from here. And I would have just thought that they would have been better than 75%, but they gave up 2 the other night to a Calgary team. Flames came into the game on Saturday with 2 power play goals on home ice, and they doubled their total against the Vancouver Canucks. So that sort of tells you the issues that the Canucks are having with the penalty kill right now. And we'll see where Zadorov ultimately falls into the mix in that regard.
Canucks aren't playing amazing hockey right now, Jeff, but they are avoiding the losing streak, right? They're nipping these in the bud. The win one, lose one is really, really frustrating for a lot of teams for Canucks fans, I don't think they should be that frustrated. If they can just churn out some, some mediocre hockey here, avoid losing streaks, and then try to build another winning streak sometime in the next couple of weeks, I think they should be fine with that, given what we think this team is pedigree-wise, which is to say, it's not a championship pedigree yet. I love the fact that they just bounced back and played a nice road game, and I think they won on the judges' cards as well as the scoreboard.
Well, they got the great start 2 minutes in, and then added to that to be up 2-0. That gave them a little bit of a cushion to give up some of those power play goals that we talked about. And you're right. They've alternated wins and losses in their last 8 games. At some point, that streak will end. And if you end it with a couple of wins, all of a sudden, you're above 500 then over a 2-week stretch. And that's just fine. And the other part is, 500 isn't going to hurt them because they put so many points in their basket right off the start with that 12-3-1 start. Now, they don't want to play 500 the rest of the way, but you saw that, when they lost to Colorado and Denver 2 weeks ago, they followed that up with an impressive win in Seattle. And while you would have loved to have made some sort of statement by beating the Avs, it's way more important to beat the Kraken to keep them behind you and extend your lead on them. The same situation applied last week. They lose to Vegas. Yeah, they would love to have, joined the big boy club for a night at the very least and shown the Stanley Cup champs what they're made of. But ultimately, if they knock off Vegas in late November, people are flexing here and it feels good. But if this is truly about making the playoffs for the Vancouver Canucks, then the win over Calgary, way more important than taking 2 points off the Golden Knights at this point, because they extend their lead to 10 over the Flames. And if you play 500 for a long stretch for Calgary to make up 10 points, they would have to go on an absolute heater. And, they're a pretty inconsistent bunch as well. They were playing better coming into the game on Saturday. But yeah, I thought all things considered, road win, the start that they got, the fact that, JT Miller didn't have a particularly good night, but you're still able to get by and beat a rival and a divisional opponent without one of your top players at the top of his game. Yeah, there were way more positives than not, I thought, for me at the Saddle Dome on Saturday night.
Jeff Paterson writes, so right, Mayor of Wrightville, right. We'll call you your worship through the rest of this interview. No, he's 10 points ahead of Calgary now, 11 points ahead of Seattle. Jeff's absolutely spot on when he says, the Vegas and the Colorado wins would have been a little bit more ego. These wins were far more important.
I think you want to get wins over those big teams eventually.
Well, eventually, sure.
And this homestand is a tough one.
Let's crawl before we walk and get to the playoffs first. And these wins against Calgary and Seattle more important. Pettersson with a goal and assist. What did you make of him? Because, first time that he had dented the score sheet like that in a while, Jeff.
Yeah, you know what, Matt? I thought he had a really good night. I thought his line and the underlying numbers showed it. I mean, they absolutely crushed their competition at even strength, spent almost all night in the offensive zone. And even if Pettersson doesn't get the empty netter and they were late to give him an assist on the Mikheyev goal, into the second intermission, he didn't have a point. And I thought, you know what? People are going to say, oh, another night where he doesn't do much. He drew a couple of penalties. Again, his line was applying pressure all night long. And then, he's out there late with the empty netter. Puck goes off his stick and ultimately is credited to him. I thought he had quietly, but effectively, I thought he had a night. He had rang that one off the post on the 5-on-3. If he scores there, people are raving about, the shot is back and all that kind of stuff. So it can be a game of inches. It was the other night, but at the end of the night, on a night when JT wasn't going, Elias Pettersson chips in with a goal and an assist. His line mates, Lafferty and Mikheyev, both score. So, yeah, I thought all things considered, a pretty good night for Elias Pettersson. And I'm curious to see, how they skated on Sunday in the same line combination. So it looks like Andrei Kuzmenko has dropped from Pettersson's line to Miller's line. And essentially what they've done is swapped out one guy in Phil DiGiuseppe, who we all questioned how long can he hold his own in the top six. He has come right out of the lineup now, and we'll see if he gets back in on Tuesday. But Sam Lafferty gets the promotion, and Lafferty's just been a really nice addition for a fifth-round draft pick. But forget the acquisition cost for just the player here, size and speed. We knew that, but some versatility and, going to the front of the net to bang in a loose puck. And we talked about this on Rinkwide on Saturday. That's an area that the Canucks have been so much better this year is net front, the tips, the screens, and ultimately just collecting some loose change lying around. Mikheyev's in front of the net there, causing problems for Markstrom, and puck squirts free to Sam Lafferty. Does Sam Lafferty have the chops to stay in a top six role? It's probably the same discussion that we had with Phil DiGiuseppe at the start of the season. But Rick Tocchet said yesterday, hey, Lafferty's a guy that, he can give them some juice. And so they were they were drinking their juice on Saturday night, and they may do it again on Tuesday against the Devils.
Maybe with his first multi-point night in 12 games, he had six of them in October. Pettersson, he had 2 in November. You got to go back to the Ottawa game on the 9th to find a multi-point game for
He was active. He deserved it. Maybe Vasily Podkolzin is the answer to the winger issue in a couple of weeks' time if he can continue to show some progress, and he's on a 3-game point streak again after coming back from injury down with the Abbey Canucks. But if the Rutherford regime here is going to stay ahead of the curve, and they're acting early here, making all these moves, they're the most active team since the start of the season in the National Hockey League in terms of trades. What's their next move? One more defenseman, or is it a winger to fill some of these holes here? Or do they just hope again that Podkolzin steps up?
Yeah, I think certainly they're going to monitor the Podkolzin situation. I think they've got a bunch of guys down on the farm, and we're starting to see some of those recalls and promotions now with Nils Aman and Linus Karlsson got in the lineup the other night. Are they long-term answers for the Vancouver Canucks? I'm not sure. I do think now, Blake, that the wish list goes to an upgrade at the wing position in the top 6, that you've got Brock Besser and the season that he's having. Ilya Mikheyev, I think, kind of quietly has gone about his business, up to 8 goals now in the 21 games that he played. And, just back to that line for a sec. I thought Mikheyev, that was about as assertive as we have seen him in a hockey game in quite some time as well. So that's a good sign there. You want to believe that Kuzmenko is going to get better. He's not going to be a 39-goal guy. I think that's pretty clear now. But I think this team could use one more winger in the top 6 with some pedigree. And, you look and see on the other side on Tuesday, Tyler Toffoli's coming to town with the Devils. And wouldn't that be a nice kind of fit to have? I think he played here once, but that's water under the bridge now. Whatever the case, all this talk about committees on defense, scoring by committee. I think ultimately you saw against Vegas the other night that this team struggled so mightily to generate much offensively. And if they are going to get into that conversation of hanging with the big boys in the National Hockey League, I think that they could use an upgrade up front. Now, that's going to come at a price. There's no doubt about that. So how do they make that work? I also wonder, because we know that, back in the heyday when Jim Rutherford was running operations elsewhere, we would see that there were these streaks and runs of just volume trades. And I know it's difficult to make deals around the NHL, but the Canucks have been active, as you point out. But, do they feel like they're in their groove now? And are they looking to make other moves? And, I wonder at some point, if Nils Aman could take that next step, Teddy Bluger's fine. Teddy Bluger doesn't really move the meter. He's only played 10 games. I'm not trying to run the guy out of town here by any stretch of the imagination. But if Nils Aman could give you everything that Teddy Bluger can give you. Now, I suppose Bluger's got some playoff pedigree and some chops that way. But, is that a piece that somewhere down the line that the Canucks could, promote from within and maybe look to, make a move in that regard? And I think the same thing ultimately applies to Tyler Myers, that if Ethan Bear does figure in their plans, and Patrick Allvin certainly wasn't waving that off again on Sunday when we had a quick chance to talk to him, for all the talk of Tyler Myers in this market, could you try to peddle this big right shot defenseman ahead of the deadline to somebody else, fill that spot with Ethan Bear, and acquire some sort of asset? I'm just throwing these out there and trying to get into the head of this management group that, I do think he's going to continue to tinker here as we move forward.
I think a lot of it pivots on whether the coaching staff is willing to play Zadorov on the right side. I think that is kind of
Ethan Bear,
one of the, and to a degree, Ethan Bear. But first things first, he got Zadorov in. We'll see if this coaching staff, which has been very hesitant to play lefties on the right side, is willing to break that wall and make that move. Secondly, as Jeff notes, when they moved Beauvillier, he talked about the push from below. And if it's not Vasily Podkolzin, maybe it's Arshdeep Bains. Hey, maybe it's Atu Ratu at some point and playing him on the wing in a lesser responsibility position. And then Toffoli's just delicious, Jeff, because he is a UFA and the Devils are struggling in a spot where I don't think a lot of people thought this team would be struggling. I mean, we're a long way from the trade deadline and this team declaring itself out, but that'd be a hell of it for a second dance with Tyler Toffoli. a guy you acquire as a rental winger.
Yeah, I guess you could make those as two separate trades, or do you find a trade partner that says we really need a right shot defenseman, and we've got a surplus of wingers. Maybe that exists, but those are tough fits.
Jeff, Alvin did finally meet the media after the Zadorov trade. Did you learn anything there? Was there anything that clued us there that jumped out to you?
No, that was sort of a whole clunky operation because the request had been made on Thursday. It was a game day for the Canucks, Vegas in town, and the Canucks pull off that trade hours before faceoff. And there were requests made by myself and pretty much everybody else along press row to talk to the general manager that night. Now, Alvin had been available on Wednesday out at UBC, and I guess he chose not to speak to the media, and there was some grumbling, I think, that got back to the organization. And so I think Sunday was really just a make good for him. But I mean, how often do we see that where a general manager comes out to talk about a trade after the player has already suited up and played and made his debut? So it was just, it was short, it was sweet. It was, he gave his thoughts on the Zadorov trade, and then was asked a little bit about the report on Hockey Night in Canada about a face-to-face meeting with Elias Pettersson. Didn't want to get into that. Was asked again about Ethan Bear, and certainly didn't close the door there. So, no, I didn't think we learned an awful lot from Patrick Alvin on Sunday, but really that's all that one was. And, just a few sort of procedural questions about timeline and the way that that deal came to be. And he noted that, they had been certainly since the preseason when Brisebois got hurt. I remember Brisebois got hurt in the Abbotsford game, and then the final preseason game, Carson Soucy went down. Now, Soucy came back. He's out now with a separate injury, but Alvin said, the first time Soucy went down, they thought that maybe they were a little thin on the back end, and that's when they started scoping around the National Hockey League, shaking some bushes just to see who might be available to them.
Lastly, Jeff, the week ahead, including this delicious matchup tomorrow against the New Jersey Devils and Quinn's two brothers, Luke and Jack. We're asking on our poll question, who's the best player on the ice tomorrow? One of the Hugheses, Pettersson. Feel free to go off the board and give me your thoughts on the week ahead with Minnesota and Carolina also here.
Yeah, start of a 5-game homestand. So for a team that spent a lot of the month of November on the road in that compressed schedule, this will be a chance just to exhale a little bit, but they're in a stretch again, 11 games in 22 nights up until the Christmas break. So that started on Saturday, and it started with a win, and we'll see if they can parlay that into a little bit of momentum. Not only the Hughes brothers, but of course, Travis Green's return to Vancouver and Rogers Arena on the 2-year anniversary of his dismissal.
Is he video worthy? Do we get video there from Travis? I think we do.
I think you do.
Yeah, I hadn't gone down that road, but perhaps they will. I think Quinn Hughes, this guy has taken on every challenge. Now, the Devils, for whatever reason, if you go back over the last decade, the Devils have absolutely owned the Canucks, which makes no sense because they've both been in the gutter for much of the last decade. Like the Devils, this has not been the heyday of the Stanley Cup champion New Jersey Devils. They've had their struggles for much of the last 10 years, and yet they have owned the Canucks. And certainly since Jack came into the National Hockey League, and I should have the numbers in front of me, but I don't, but it has been a one-sided battle. I kind of get the feeling that Quinn's going to go enough. Like there's two of them over there. There's only one of me, but look out. And we've seen this all season long. Like he just continues to put this team on his back. He raises his game. He's up to 9 goals now. That's a career high. He would love to score against his brothers and just further that whole storyline. So, I think I'll vote Quinn, and I don't think you can ever go wrong voting Quinn Hughes in something like a poll question like that one.
Good.
I think he'll be excellent, but Jack is one of my favorite players to watch. He's just so much fun. And Luke, who took that big hit last week, and I was a little worried that was going to, ruin this entire storyline, that maybe he wouldn't be available. But Luke is quite, I don't know if people are paying attention to what Luke is doing as a 20-year-old defenseman, but leads the Devils in ice time. Now that Dougie Hamilton's out for a while, he's going to be asked to do even more, but he's having a fine rookie season. And it's incredible what the parents have done here in raising 3 absolute stud hockey players. And so, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Return match in New Jersey early in the new year. So twice in the next month, we're going to get this Hughes brothers storyline. And then beyond that, Minnesota, it looks like the coaching change has breathed a little bit of life into the Wild. So a week ago, you might have thought that was the easy spot on the homestand, but the Wild will come to town playing a little bit better and with some confidence there. And then Saturday night, Carolina. I know that they haven't necessarily had the season yet that people have always kind of been, high on them to get it right. This is going to be the year but they're still a good team. They're a formidable foe. And after that, then Tampa and Florida. So a heavy dose of Eastern cooking on this homestand for the Vancouver Canucks.
Luke Hughes tied for second in rookie scoring with Marco Rossi, who we'll see on Thursday. And they all, of course, trail Connor Bedard, North Van's Connor Bedard. Jeff, marvelous stuff. Thank you for this. We will catch up later in the week.
All right, guys. Thanks.
This great clip brought to you by, wait for it, Great Clips. It's going to be great.